Boker Tov, everyone. Main topic of this week's Parsha Shiur is the covenant, the bridge that the Rabbi Shalom entered into Kaviyachol with the Jewish people, with Klal Yisrael. And Moshe says it openly. You're all here today. What's the purpose? To confirm the covenant that the Lord had made with you, and that will be the basis of Jewish existence throughout the ages. Now, there are many problems when we look at this Brit. The Brit is that if the Jewish people observe the Torah, so then they're entitled to Eretz Israel, and they're entitled to a meaningful life. If, God forbid, they don't observe the Brit, so then all bets are off. The Lord, so to speak, owes us nothing. Yeah, that's it. That's the way it is. So we would be left to the natural forces of history and society. And if the natural forces are the ones that prevail, so then the Jewish people are pretty much doomed. Because we are a small people. And we're universally hated for whatever reasons, or for the lack of a reason. And it's a world of violence. So then if the protective hand of the Lord is not present, so then all of a sudden terrible things can happen. And we saw the outline of the terrible thing in last week's Parsha of Kitavot, where the Torah in the Tosafot describes for us the Crusades, the Shoah, the Muslims. It's all described there. So usually when we think of a covenant, we think that it is two-sided. By that I mean that both sides have to accept it, have to agree to it. And this is a strange covenant, because in the Torah itself it says, Ki lo itchem levatchem karati et habrit hazot. Not only with you have I made this covenant, Ki asher yeshno po imanu omer hayom lifnei Hashem Elokecho, asher einenu po omer imanu hayom. The covenant is for those that are present. The covenant is even for those who are not present. What does that mean? How can you make a covenant for those who are not present? Those who are not present never agree to it. They never had a chance to express their wishes. So this is a question that's fundamental understanding the power of the covenant. The covenant binds people who never subscribe to the covenant. It binds people who weren't at Har Sinai, who did not say Naaseh v'nishma. Why are they bound? And then the Torah goes out of its way to tell us that if you think that way, that if you're not bound by the covenant because you didn't agree to it, because you weren't present when it, so to speak, went into effect, the person will say to himself, I'm not bound. I'll do what I want. I'm not bound by a covenant that I never subscribed to. So then the Torah says, too bad. The Lord will not forgive that person, and he remains a negative force within the Jewish people. He's shoresh poreh rosh v'lama. He's poison, destructive as can be. We live at a time when we think that, even though we don't have it, but we think we have freedom to choose. I can vote for whatever party I want, as though that matters. Yeah, whatever I want. I remember when I was in Miami Beach. So there was a man that came to shul, whatever, but he was not observant at all. And I once spoke to him and I said, maybe you'll make Kiddush on Shabbos. And he said to me, Rabbi, I'm Reformed. So if you're Reformed, you're not obligated to anything. He doesn't accept the covenant. So I can't say to him, why don't you observe the covenant? I never agreed to it. I never said I'd be part of it. And yet the Torah says, Lo Yoveh Hashem Sloach Lo. He will not, or overlooked. One of the ideas that Chazal said was that at Har Sinai, all of the souls of the Jewish people, for all of the generations, however we will imagine that, if we even can imagine it, were present. So in essence, everyone did say Naaseh v'nishma. And therefore, if a person says, now, I'm not bound, so he's going back on his word, on what his soul originally said. But that's an esoteric, spiritual, almost Kabbalistic idea. Because physically, there's no one in this room that was at Har Sinai. So we see that the nature of the covenant is such that it is not personal, it's national. Now, a national covenant naturally imposes duties on the individual. In the simplest form, all of us pay taxes to the government. We never agreed to that. But if you're living under the government, and there's a law that you have to pay taxes, then you have to pay taxes. And you cannot say, I'm against taxes. That doesn't free you from the national covenant. So the Torah says that there is a national covenant that will govern the Jewish people. And that within that national covenant, the individual Jew will find himself or herself. Now, how do you enter that national covenant? By birth. So we have no choice whatsoever. I'm a Jew because my father and mother were Jewish. No one asked me, do you want to be a Jew? But nevertheless, because of the overriding national covenant, so I'm a Jew. And therefore, when it comes, God forbid, to all sorts of challenges and troubles and sad events, it happens to all the Jews. They don't ask you, did you put on Rabbeinu Tam's film today? They don't ask those questions because it's a national. I remember we had a professor here in Shul, a survivor from the Shoah. He was a professor of physics at the Hebrew U, and he was really a wonderful human being. Once in a while, he would talk to me about his experiences in the war. So he said that he noticed that the secular Jews in the main were the ones that he used to say went to the wire, because what he meant was there was an electric fence, and if you touched the electric fence, you were electrocuted, and that was the end. And he said to me, and the reason why they went to the fence and other Jews never even imagined going to the fence, no matter how bad the situation was, is because he said, I knew why I was in the camp. I knew the story of Rabbi Akiva. I knew the story of Bar Kochba. I knew why. But they didn't know why. And if you don't know why, so then what happens to you is doubly troublesome. Because then it looks like there's nothing that can explain it. So then it's completely random, so to speak. If you live a life that's completely random, so then the solution is to go to the wire. So the covenant is national. And as long as the Jewish people are involved in the covenant, so then the Lord forgives us. The individual is not forgiven. It says, Lo Yoveh Hashem Sloach Lo. The individual is judged. There's a famous piece in the Meshech Chochmah by Meir Simcha. If you look at the Jewish people as a whole, God will forgive us. Because that's the national covenant. God was also bound by the national covenant that Netzach Yisrael Lo Yishakir. The future of the Jewish people, no matter what the troubles, we're going to be here. We're an eternal people. The individual Jew is a different matter. So this idea of the national covenant is what Moshe is talking about here. How do we look at society? So is society basically Jewish, so to speak? Does it have Torah values? Or is it not? Sdom and Amorah in the Chumash Bereshis, these cities are destroyed because the entire population didn't have values. They didn't have hospitality. They didn't have basic values, how people are supposed to live one with another. To be kind to one another, to be charitable to one another. In fact, they constructed a value system just the opposite. So then when Lot wants to entertain the Malachim, to entertain the angels, they surround the house and they said, "What are you? You know, you're a traitor. You're against our value system." And therefore, that's why Sodom and Amorah were destroyed. Because the society is gone. But in our time, we have seen it with the collapse of the Soviet Union. The value system was destroyed. The value system that an individual has rights, it was all destroyed. So when it's destroyed, it's destroyed. Eventually, that society has to collapse. It's part of the challenge that we have today with Western society. The value system. It's not the individual Avera. The individual sin is a symptom. It's a result of the fact that the value system is lost. So there was a value system of morality. But when I grew up in America, in the public school system, they taught you the value system of morality. So it was morality in how you behaved, it was morality in business, it was morality on the street, it was a modicum of morality in the entertainment industry. You couldn't say every word, you couldn't see everything. It was a value system. But the value system is gone. And when the value system goes, then the society hurtles to its own destruction. No matter how wealthy or strong it may be. Again, if you go back and look at the story of Sdom, that was the wealthiest city. It was on the most fertile ground. It was victorious in war. And it was destroyed because it did not have a moral value system. So that value system applies eternally. It's asher yeshno po imanu omed hayom in the present tense regarding problems that we face today. Ves asher einenu po imanu omed hayom, and it applies for those that are not here. Now, those that are not here include the past, and they include the future. If there is a value system that runs through the generations, so then we have to say that it has a chance. But if it's a value system that is based only on current understandings, which will change, think about it over the last 50 years, how the value system of the Western world has radically changed in front of our eyes when we experience it. There's nothing that's forbidden. There's nothing that's immoral. I will do what I want to do. Do what I want to do leads to the fact that a totalitarian government will tell you what to do. Because now there is no break on the value system that is being destroyed. And nature abhors a vacuum. So in a vacuum where there is no value system, the government, the dictators, other things enter to control. You see that in Chazal, when they describe all the ancient tyrants that appear in the Tanakh. Nebuchadnezzar, Sanherib. They are tyrants. They force you to do what they want to do. But they're the product of a value system that allows it to happen. So we have to look and see. I always say, if Moshe Rabbeinu would come back today and look at the Jewish world, would he recognize us? I think in the main he would. Because the value system in the main in the Jewish world is still the value system that he taught and represented. We still are against corruption, even though corruption exists. We're against stealing, even though stealing exists. We're against idolatry, even though idolatry exists. But he would recognize us. If Aristotle or Plato or Julius Caesar came back, they wouldn't know what. Take them to Disney World, imagine. Who would know what to say? So the test of the covenant is Eis asher yeshno po imanu omed hayom As the value system remains, so to speak, constant. I'm not talking again about observance. That's a different thing. That's the individual. The individual, and that's why we have tshuva, and that's why we have all of these abilities to improve ourselves. But is the value system constant? I remember when I was in the yeshiva, the Rebbe used to say that if your grandfather was proud of you and your grandchild was proud of you, then you're probably all right. And that's true. And that works both ways. I'm proud of my grandfather. I'm proud of my grandchildren. Because we share the same value system. And by sharing the same value system, so that's the covenant. And that's why we're bound by it. And we don't believe that things happen at random. I had a year of war and of tragedy and of sadness, but a year of miracles and a year of strength. So the question is, how do we look at it? What is the strength of our value system to be able to withstand the pressures and iniquities of the general society outside the land of Israel? Just there are 140 nations in the United Nations. 139 are against us. There's a small country in the Pacific that has 2 islands. They're with us. So we're in good shape. And that's what Chazal said. Keves echod bein shivim zeivim. That's what the Ramban said to the king of Spain. One little sheep with 70 wolves. But the sheep has the value system. The sheep will survive. The wolves eventually consume themselves. And that's the covenant that the Lord made with us. That's the covenant that we abide by. And that's the covenant that should give us strength. And that we'll see in Hazinu. Moshe will say, Schor Yemos Olam, Binu Shnos Dor V'Dor. Look backwards, not only forward. How'd you get here? Did you ever hear anything like this? Did anybody ever come back in history? Did anybody ever redo an ancient language and make it lingua franca in the country? A bunch of shoemakers make an air force? Look. So the covenant is based on this awareness. We cannot cancel it because it's a national covenant. The Lord Kaviochel will not cancel it because he promised our forefathers that we would be an eternal people. And I think that's the attitude that we have to have going into the new year. have to continue to be strong and optimistic and to recognize the miraculous time that we live in. What a time that we live in. What we have seen. What we continue to see. So I want to wish you all Ksiva V'Chsima Tova. Next Friday is Rosh Hashanah, and then the next Friday is Erev Yom Kippur, and then there's Sukkot. So, and they're going to turn the clock. So we'll see you later. Shabbat Shalom V'Barach.